happening, MLOps community? I wanted to make a bite-sized podcast because there's been so many great conversations that have come into our ecosystem. And as I listened back to a few of them, I thought there's common themes that keep reoccurring and threads that I would like to pull on a little bit more and show you how different guests on the podcast or at the conferences talk about essentially the same thing in different words. So I appreciate you joining me for this little adventure. Let's go on this journey together. The theme that I want to touch on is this idea of testing, and specifically some common patterns that are coming up when we talk about model output and testing the model output. One theme that I feel like many people have said is you want to have your always okay output, never okay output, and fuzzy, I don't really know, let's check a little bit more output. In our AI quality conference that happened in June a few months ago, Erica Greene, the head of engineering for ML at Yahoo News, came and talked to us about exactly this. Let's hear how she puts it.
One of the themes that I think is emerging from all this evaluation work is that it's good to have tiers of your test cases. Not every test case is the same, right? So you really want it to work on the easy examples, and it better be really, really good on the easy examples. And then there's the hard or the wishy-washy, people don't agree on them. And then there's like the really bad examples, or it would be very bad. So you need to start, but you really need to get in the data deeply and have a lot of people looking at it, not just the engineers.
Eric is not the only one that feels that way. Matar came on the podcast a few months ago, and she was talking about a very similar thing. Now, Matar is the VP of data at ActiveFence, and what they are doing is they're using machine learning to protect the internet against hate speech. So they're able to analyze hate speech and say, with a certain degree of confidence, if it should or should not be okay on a provider's website. One caveat to this is that Erica was talking about evaluation metrics, and now Matar is going to call it functional tests. Kind of the same thing, but Matar, I do not think, is using an LLM here because it's not needed. You don't always need LLMs to classify the text on something. This is more of a classification problem. LLMs are great for that, but it's like taking a Ferrari to the supermarket.
So a functional test, what this does is it basically enables targeted identification of model weak spots. What that means is that you basically take subsets of your policy or subsets of your target definition, if you will, and you write tests specifically for those things. So for example, for hate speech, you can have reclaimed slurs. You can have hate speech expressed using a slur, right? These are sort of two sides of a coin. And you want to have a test that basically ensures that it's, if I say I'm proud to be a or I'm the freshest in town, these should always be negative, right? This is like a set of, a bunch of examples of reclaimed slurs that I need to make sure that my model doesn't mess it up, right? Because that's like one subset of my target definition. If I say you are just a to me, or I hate or dirty right? These are slurs. And I'm going to have a bunch of those examples. And I want to make sure that my model is consistently performing and flagging those as negative. And I have a huge bank of functional tests. And then, precision recall is important, but I want to look at how I perform on these. Because then I can say, oh, great, my model is amazing, except I'm always failing. For example, on harassment and bullying, for a while, we were always failing on like wishing someone cancer. Like we just couldn't get that. And you need to catch that, right?
While we were gearing up for the AI Quality Conference, we had Mohamed, the CEO of Kolena, come on the podcast because we did the conference with him, and he shared his opinion about what makes testing for machine learning and AI a little bit different than your normal software tests. His whole point that he brings up is you have to test the data. And by data, what I realized is he's talking about the output. what the model outputs, you have to also be testing that, not just the code. So as you are testing the model output, aka the data that is being generated, then you can recognize if the model is doing what it should be doing. Let's hear how he puts it. You mentioned how testing is just one step along the way to quality.
Yeah, I mean, there are two main sections for this. One is test coverage and one is what's acceptable, right? So let's break it down a little bit. One is test coverage, right? When you are testing, when you're like software, right? When you're testing in software, you have to assert a lot of functions, this is what the like unit testing would look like in software, but you know the logic, right? You know what you built it for. Testing in machine learning or AI is different. You're testing based on data sets. So when you are testing your GenAI model, here's a good example actually outside LLMs there. Let's say generative AI in images, Gemini, right? So Gemini is a great example for here. And then exactly like you mentioned, things are good until they are not good. You push something.
Where you're going with it.
Yeah.
You give it to the world.
So that's a great example of, okay, how do we push out our first product with no embarrassing risks, or even worse, no impactful risks, right? So that's the first piece. And then obviously after that, that's the first product. How do you keep pushing out new releases and giving your customers the better product?
All right, there's a clear pattern emerging. That's obvious. Being able to look at the model output and say, go, no go, maybe go, is so important. We're recognizing that just by the people that are talking about it, but also if you've played around with any models, you know there's some things that you don't want it outputting, and there's some things that you always want it outputting, but you don't want your guardrails to catch that as something it shouldn't be outputting. As Matar calls them, these functional tests are brilliant, but how do you know what is okay and what's not okay and what that distribution looks like? Well, Catherine came on the podcast and she recently wrote a book about software engineering for data scientists. And she explained how folks that really want to go deep into this analysis and look at the distribution of the output of the models, aka the data, they're in prime position to be the types that probably gravitated towards data science in the past.
I recently started consulting for a GenAI startup and started playing around with LLMs. And for me, this brings an extra dimension, because evaluating LLMs is hard. It's really uncertain how you do this at the moment. But I think that working out whether LLMs are doing the task that you want them to be doing is absolutely in the data science set of skills, but it needs both statistics knowledge and knowledge of the internal workings of the machine learning model. So I think it brings both those divergent skill sets back together again.
All right, that's it. The highlight reel is done. If you enjoyed this style of podcast, please let me know. I would love to get your feedback because I don't know if I should keep doing them. And in case you are not signed up for the Data Engineering for AI and ML virtual conference we've got coming up on September 12th, go and do that right now. I highly recommend it. We've got some incredible speakers, and I promise to sing out of key. If that doesn't get you there, I don't know what else will.
These models are toxic.